Hi there, I'm PK, and I saw your first video on the Valve Index. It was really bad. It was awful, actually. You claimed to have done a decent amount of research, but you just said a lot of things that were entirely false. I don't know if you just suck at researching, or if you're a liar. It's either one, really. Because it was just a lot of blatant falsehoods. I made my comment on that video, and so did a lot of other people. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it. I might mention it here and there just because it might be relevant, but you made a second video, and that's what I'm here to talk about. Because you responded to some of the comments in general, and you did a really bad job of doing so. And you kind of acted like you would come out on top with your response, and you really just didn't make any new arguments. You kind of just reiterated yourself. So I'm going to go through and talk about what you said. One of the big major issues people had with your first video, including myself, was you acted like current games were not going to work with the index, which you said you didn't say in your second video. And you had said some specific things, and I'll tell you why people, I think you're missing it, why people at least thought that you were trying to say that the index wasn't going to work with current games, or just wasn't going to work with current games. You had said that you would still be stuck playing Gorn at the same resolution as the Vive, which is false. You will definitely be able to play it at the resolution of the index with the refresh rate of the index, actually. So you'll have both the visual clarity, just from the increased resolution, and the higher FPS. So that's just a straight improvement on all existing titles. They will work just fine. But in your second video, you claimed that that's not what you were saying, even though it was. You were saying that games that exist won't be able to take full advantage of all the features, which just isn't true either. The only feature that will not work with currently existing games, if those games do not update to support it, is the finger tracking present on the controllers. Everything else works. The buttons on the controller, the higher refresh rate, all of that will work just fine with all existing Steam VR games. That's just how Steam VR is built. It handles all of that behind the scenes. There is a control binding system so that you can take your new index controllers and rebind the old games to work with them. The old games will have a default binding, which just maps some inputs on the Vive wands to different things on the index controllers. And that works pretty well for most games, but if you need to tweak it, which for some games I decided to, I have a pair of Knuckles, the EV3s, and tweaking them is really fast. It's really simple. The UI is very good, and it works fantastically. I've been playing Contractors a lot with these controllers, and that's a VR shooter, and the guns feel great moving with the analog stick, feels great. It is a big improvement over the Vive wands, and yeah, they took some good notes from, I think, the Rift. Really, those touch controllers probably inspired just having that thumbstick at the very least, and maybe those two top buttons. Definitely a big improvement. But so really what you're getting is, if the game does not update to support the finger tracking of the new controllers, it's kind of just like playing a game at a high resolution with a higher refresh rate, so on a better headset than the Rift, with a more comfortable version of the touch controllers. Because that's really what I would put these down as a more comfortable and really more versatile version of the touch controllers, because there's still this touchpad right here which you can bind yourself to whatever you want. You can even, this is funny, you can bind left-hand actions to right-hand actions, or like so. Say there's something wrong with like my thumbstick on the left on my left controller for whatever reason, and the game uses the left thumbstick for movement. All I have to do is go into my settings and rebind it so that the right thumbstick is the left thumbstick, and that will work. The game will recognize that. That's, again, all out of the box. Developers don't have to do anything. That is above where the game developers at least, need to worry. That's all handled by Steam VR. So, people gave you a list of games that had implemented it's a list of games that have implemented either their own bindings, so not just the default bindings, but their own bindings for these, or finger tracking, which is a kind of a big deal. Finger tracking's nice. It is a big bonus for like having user presence and immersion. It's not necessarily required. Like Contractors, which is what I've played a lot with these, probably the game I've played most with these, doesn't have finger tracking, and I think it's still massively better with these. I do not use my Vive wands anymore because these are just so nice. But anyway, that list, it had a lot more than just games that were backwards compatible, and you didn't read it. Multiple people, including myself, linked it, and you brushed it off, and you didn't read it at all. That is evident because you brushed it off as something that was just a list of backwards compatible games. That's not what it is. It is both existing, so backwards compatible, and upcoming games. One of those big games, and you also later on in your second video here say, show me one game, or there are no games coming out that will take full advantage of the Index controllers, or just the Index's feature set. That's bullshit. Boneworks is coming out this year. I'm expecting it to be a launch title, but it's coming out this year, and that is one of the, I guess, superstar kind of games. Everyone's talking about Boneworks. That's an Index game that has full support for the finger tracking. The finger tracking is, again, the only feature that will not just automatically work. It's the only thing devs have to do to implement. And you did this more in your first video than you did in your second video, but I'm going to talk about it. You said that it was really difficult for developers to deal with finger tracking. It's not. That's just bogus. You, I guess, might think that because it is seemingly complicated. The developers don't have to write their own algorithms or anything for dealing with this. That's all set up. All you have to do is plug some of the pre-made Steam VR plugins into your game, maybe retool them a little bit as a developer. You might have to change them a little bit. Not that big of a deal. They will work with any hand rig. You can very easily set them up to work, to take in the pose from the controller and put it on that model, because that's all it's doing. And it's not difficult. It would just take maybe most developers an afternoon or two if they're doing something really weird with their game setup, or if they're using a very old version of some of the Steam VR plugins, depending on whether or not they're on the Unreal plugin or the Unity plugin. It's going to be a little bit different. I can only speak for using Unity because that's what I know. It's what I use for VR, just because it's, for the longer time, Unity was the better option for VR games. And I'm getting way off subject here. This is not a developer video. But really the only decent point you make is asking where's Valve's launch title. There is none, and that's disappointing. I'll say that as a Valve fan and an Index pre-orderer. That's pretty annoying. All we have right now is there's confirmation from Valve that there is a VR game coming, a flagship VR game coming 2019. And just knowing Valve, you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt, because we've been being told about games from Valve for a while. You make a joke about it, the Half-Life 3 fiasco. That's Valve. However, they gave a promise, a confirmation of a game, so we'll see. I cannot wait to see that announced, but can't give a whole lot of credence to that. So yes, you're fair to say that. Where's the Valve launch title? That's a good point. That's your only good point. Everything else was either built on bad logic or lies. Maybe not lies, maybe lies is the wrong term, but misinformation. So lies at worst, misinformation at best. And that's kind of why people claim that you didn't do your research, because you very obviously didn't. You brushed that off very early in your video. That's one of the first things you mentioned is someone was like, "Oh, you clearly only did 3 minutes of research," and you said that they were just trolling. And that might be fair for that one comment. I read that comment too. There was no argument made there. They were just kind of attacking you. But everyone else also questioned how much research you did, because you claimed to have dug through all the information, like you had gone through everything, when you clearly didn't, since you didn't seem to understand how Steam VR works, and that everything that currently exists will work flawlessly on the index at full index resolution and everything. And so then when people give you that list of games, you brush it off as just backwards compatible, which it's not what it was. You didn't read it, which also shows that you don't do your research. And then you just brush off backwards compatibility as a whole, which I don't think is fair, because it's not just games being backwards compatible, it's games being improved. If I play a game that is a Vive game with the index and with the index controllers, or even with the Vive controllers and just on the index headset, it's still going to be a better experience. It's a straight upgrade, because higher resolution, way better optics, and a better refresh rate. That's a big deal. All of those will transfer. So I don't see where your argument lies. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you might try, but there's not a lot of weight to your argument besides where's the Valve game, and right now we don't know. Everything else is bullshit. just bullshit. You act like there's not going to be any games coming out. You said it would be like 1 or 2 years before we saw a game taking full advantage of the index, which is wrong. Just for example, I know I've mentioned it multiple times, but Boneworks is coming this year, most likely launching with the index. And on top of that, there are other games. And like you said, you don't want some game that's made by a couple guys in their garage or whatever, so I won't mention maybe some of the smaller games, which they exist. They're out there. Oh shit, I just knocked my table. They're out there, but if you don't want to give them any credence, I won't mention them. Boneworks is probably the biggest and best one. That's why I kind of am looking to that. But there's also No Man's Sky. That's getting VR support, and from what I've read, it seems like it's been suggested that they do have finger tracking support. If not, they are building for the index, because IGN did some reporting on that, and they claimed it as an index launch title, and so did Valve. Actually, they put that up there on like the list of games supporting the index when it launches. And so if those games aren't coming with native finger tracking, they are just having their own custom, bindings, which are made with care from the devs to be correct for the controllers. So either way, either way, that's just a good thing. And that's all I have to say. I don't think that there's anything else I can say. Do some research. Yeah, that's about it. Bye.